Coming to you from the Star City, this is Scarlet Fever, a daily Nebraskan production.
Well, it's the same old, same old. They just actually got one more win this time. Welcome to Scarlet Fever in the new digs. Yeah, it looks a little bit different, something you're not exactly used to, but those of you listening on Spotify and Apple, who the heck cares, because you have no idea that it's anywhere different. Anyway, so what does it matter? It is finally December. It is December 3rd. Regular season of college football is over, and Scarlet Fever is back in full force. Let's go. Thanksgiving's over, so now you're back stuck with us. I feel terrible for you. It's Danny, Emma, Anthony. Hello, everybody. How are we?
Good. Good to be here. Glad to be here.
Doing good. Good to be back on Scarlet Fever.
I know it's been a little bit for you.
Been a minute.
But if there's anything that's been a constant, Anthony, is that the Nebraska football team is really good at one thing. They're really good at pushing us away, then trying to very carefully spoon feed us into being interested again, and then cutting our hearts out with a knife.
Yeah, it was just a brutal last game against Iowa. Pretty much a copy and paste of just last year's game, just in Iowa this time, not Nebraska. And it really looked like they were kind of turning a new chapter in their program, obviously clinching bowl eligibility.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
Wisconsin.
We haven't been here since that crazy day happened.
Yeah, they just win in dominant fashion. They look like the better team. They just go out there and play confidently. I know Wisconsin had its injuries and isn't the best team ever. They're not making a bowl game this year. But going up against Iowa, Nebraska should have won this game. If you look at every stat, Nebraska beat Iowa in it. It really just is bottled down to just a few key plays where Iowa just knows how to make them. Nebraska collapsed in those moments, and it was really brutal to watch.
This is where I steal one of the Jalen Reyes quotes that he's told me at the midnight hour. Numbers don't mean anything in the ultimate grand scheme of things, because, yeah, this is one of those games where math doesn't make any sense. Nebraska had nearly 40 minutes of possession, something outrageous in that respect, and somehow Iowa only had 5 first downs and won the game. Doesn't make any sense.
And I don't think they converted on third down ever throughout the whole game.
Yeah, they were 0 for 10 on third down.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It's the more you look at it, the more it's just like
the worse it gets.
Yeah, it's insane.
The worse it gets, and it feels like we're just doing it again. We're doing it all over again. The endless cycle continues, and all that comes with the fact that Nebraska clinched postseason eligibility for the first time since 2016. Does it even matter at this point, because we are dealing with the same things that we've been dealing with since 2016? Like, is this just kind of a moot point now?
I think the extra practices are like the main thing that really helps and that fans really want.
Yeah, does the bowl game even matter? Is it just the extra practices?
I think it's just
the only good thing of this that's come out of this?
Pretty much so. I mean, you're going to look at just all the opt-outs that are going to be coming. Pretty much every NFL player who wants to get drafted is likely going to take this game off. And I don't know how much that would affect Nebraska. We have been seeing, transfers these last couple of days. That is definitely going to affect them. But, yeah, it's really just for extra practices, develop your young guys. A lot of them are probably going to see the field as well in the bowl game too for the first real time of their college careers. So that's really – it's like the final score of the game really doesn't matter, in my opinion.
Yeah, but let's get into the Iowa game real quickly. Anthony, you were there in Iowa City, and you got to stay out of the cold, so God bless you. Can't say the same for Jackson and Lily.
Oh, yeah.
That was a shame.
rough.
Although you did have to go out in it after the game, which probably was worse than having to do it during the game. But anyway, what were some of the things that you saw? We can do the positives and the negatives. You can kind of take it where you want, but some things that caught your attention during the game last week.
Yeah, I mean, overall, first off, Kinnick Stadium is pretty underrated atmosphere, I will say. Growing up an Iowa hater, I didn't want to give them any credit, but I will say good atmosphere there, very loud. At the end of the game, I was on the field when they kicked the game-winning field goal, and it was honestly the loudest I've heard a stadium this year. So kudos to the Hawkeye fans for that. But as for the game itself,
Did you get to do the wave?
We did. Luckily, the press box is like looking right at the Children's Hospital, which obviously again is one of the best traditions in college football. So really, really just cool environment. As for the game, it was just Nebraska beating itself again. I mean, you look at just all three areas, offense, defense, and special teams. Even if they looked good at certain points, they just always found a way to like mess up one of these plays, whether it's on a punt return that is just misplayed, misjudged, or Iowa gets it inside the 5. The defense just forgetting how to tackle Caleb Johnson on a 72-yard touchdown. And then, of course, the strip sack at the end of the game, setting Iowa up in field goal position. It really just shows me that, like, even if, Nebraska got that monkey off their back, made a bowl game, beat Wisconsin for the first time in forever, but they still have these same kind of miscues that have plagued them in years past.
Yeah, going to that Caleb Johnson run, I was actually really impressed with how Nebraska's defense held him for so long, but I knew there was going to be one breakaway play throughout the game where it was going to be like 60-plus yards, and it was a big run for him. So, but credit where credit's due. They held him for most of the game.
Your classic Big Ten West game.
Yep.
Lots of punts.
Yeah.
Lots of punts, and you can't even say that Iowa's offense even looked that good they were pretty inept for most of the game. I mean, we said it. They were 0 for 10 on third downs. That's pretty bad to still be able to come out with a 3-point win, which was no fault of your own. They didn't even get on the scoreboard till late in the third quarter. Iowa's offense looked pretty miserable there in that first half. It honestly looked like it was going to be one of those high-scoring baseball games where one team puts up 2 grand slams and a couple RBI doubles, and then they shut them out on the other side. Like it had the makings of potentially being like a 13-0 game. Like that's where it seemed like it was along the paths of, because Iowa just it seemed like they had absolutely no identity at all, and it was 3 and out after 3 and out.
Yeah, they had 20 plays in the first half and had 20 yards of total offense. The Caleb Johnson 72-yard touchdown basically was half of their offensive yards for the game. They had 82 total yards without that play. So it was really a masterclass from the Nebraska defense up until that one play. And then they still ended up coming back to it and forcing big punts down the stretch. It just was the offense and then special teams gifting Iowa the ball already in field goal range that they didn't even have to do anything. Like the punt, the Black Shirts made a great goal line stand on that, but at the end of the day, Iowa was getting 3 points regardless there. So yeah, it was just a very frustrating game for Husker fans.
Yeah, and I think where it really started to boil over was the muffed punt there from ICG and Vincent Shavers going after the ball where he thought it was touched. I mean, you could very clearly see if you were watching it on TV that it didn't get touched at first. And then Shavers came a second too early. And that's where it seemed like the undoing was going to start happening. Mm-hmm. Iowa goes and gets a chip shot field goal, but that's where it felt like, okay, you had all this going for you, but now this happens, like, okay, now all the pieces are going to start falling out of the sky.
It's a big momentum killer.
Yeah, for sure. And then you just look at the Nebraska punt return this entire year. It hasn't been explosive by any means. I mean, IGC just fair catches every time he catches a punt. I don't know when was the last time he actually returned one, but you could say that they stayed mistake-free. He caught the ball. He never muffed a punt all season. And then in this last game, he finally, misplays the ball. Just the way it was reacted by the Iowa defenders and stuff like that caused Shavers to react the way he did. Obviously not a smart play, but I'm not completely blaming the freshman there. If you're IGC, you got to just get out of the way as soon as possible once you know that.
And wave everyone off.
Yeah, and wave everyone off.
I don't think he did that.
Yeah. So it was just a big momentum shifter. Set Iowa up deep in their own in Nebraska's 5-yard line. And this was a team that never could convert on third downs and never could pick up many first downs. So it just definitely gifted them some easy points.
So with all that aside, there will be another game that Nebraska is going to be playing. And it's probably going to be right after Christmas. It's looking like as they'll be going bowling for the first time since 2016. There's a couple that are starting to look like could be possibilities, but there's two very distinct ones. And it's the Pinstripe Bowl and the Music City Bowl for Nebraska. More likely than not, my gut feeling, and I know some other people have said it too, is the Pinstripe Bowl is the most likely one right now.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think it's the Pinstripe Bowl. I think Michigan beating Ohio State really just shifted everything going forward. I mean, Nebraska beating Iowa would have helped immensely as well. That maybe even play in Tampa there. I've seen if Nebraska were to beat Iowa. But, yeah, Michigan beating Ohio State really gets them that 7th win over Nebraska 6. And they're a team that won the national championship last year. They submitted their little request for bowl games, and it goes Tampa, Nashville, and then New York. And it's going to be hard if you're Nashville to not pick a team like Michigan if they're available, coming off of the win they have.
Yeah, and I also think, too, something else you have to consider, and I wasn't considering this at first, for Power 4 v. Power 4 bowl games, there can't be too much of a difference when it comes to wins. So the bowls that Nebraska is going to play in, they can only play teams that also are 6-6 or are 7-5, and that's it. I know for sure that's the binding part of the Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium. I'm not sure if where else that applies. I don't know that is for sure, but it helps there with competitive balance, making sure that you still get a good game. And when you consider this theory, I was talking to Erin Sorensen about this earlier today, and she brought up how in the Big Ten football bowl draft, so to speak, with the ReliaQuest Bowl, they could take a 6-6 Nebraska team, but would it be worth it to have a 7-5 SEC team that's still going to travel, or would you want a better game where you have a 7-win Michigan and an 8-win SEC team, a 8-win, I don't know, or a 7-win Vanderbilt, like a Michigan Vanderbilt, if you wanted to go that route where they're both going to travel and you're in the heart of SEC country, or even like a Michigan Florida. Would you rather have that or have like a Nebraska Vanderbilt? And I think that we all know which one that the bowl committee would want. Michigan, Florida.
Yeah, it's just very, very interesting. It's kind of refreshing still to have Nebraska in these talks.
Yeah, it's a little weird, ain't it?
It's like maybe, these cities want Nebraska to play. It's just their record is really kind of staining it. And that's why the Pinstripe Bowl against, Boston College or like a 7-win ACC team just seems most likely.
I've heard Duke a lot too.
Yeah, I've seen that as well, yeah.
I think another one that's going to be interesting to see is the bowl game in Detroit against one of the MAC schools. I think that one also could potentially be there for Nebraska. I think it's very unlikely. I think the Pinstripe Bowl will take them first because I know they come before the bowl game in Detroit, which isn't the the Quick Lane Bowl anymore. It's got a new name.
Like the Game Above Sports Bowl. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds very, very original. I think that one's also a possibility as well. I think it's a lot less likely than the Pinstripe Bowl because you're getting a national brand. And national brand Nebraska, where did that come from? But it is true, they are a national brand. Having a national brand Nebraska go up against like a Boston College, like that would bring a lot of revenue in, even though it is in New York. But for the bowl committee, it would bring in a lot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting on Sunday when the bowl games are announced where Nebraska's going because, again, it's really just there's so many different ones. I mean, I've even seen people throw out like the Duke's Mayo Bowl or the Rate Bowl in Phoenix, which I don't think the Mayo Bowl is very likely.
Not anymore.
It would be, in my opinion, the most ideal one. I mean,
that's where I think Iowa's going to go.
Yeah, it's just because it's like January 3rd or whatever. Not like a big day for football or anything like that. Like not in the build up to New Year's Eve or anything. But yeah, it's just every single day new projections are coming out. And Nebraska's just all over the place. So
no one really knows where they're going to go because we've seen that this team, even though they're 6-6, I feel like they probably should be 4-8. And we've seen it all season long. But anyway, there's a bigger topic that I think we got to get into briefly, and it is now transfer season. But along with it being transfer season, it's coach reshuffling time, and there's been a lot of musical chairs going on with that. Most notably, Tony White is making his way down to Tallahassee.
Yeah, just really shocking development here. I mean, he's been a guy who last season garnered a lot of defensive coordinator and even head coaching talks around the country. So you knew obviously that this year was going to be there as well. But just to have him, the reports were out that Florida State was looking at him yesterday, and then already by the end of the day, he's signed a deal with them. So it's just very interesting. We've seen kind of the ripple effect already with Nebraska and their defense, with how many players from last year, guys like Jamari Butler, who a week ago said that he's returning to Nebraska next season. Now he's in the transfer portal. So it's really just a domino effect from here on out.
Yeah, Jamari Butler, Mekhi Bayer also out, Prince Will, Umami Yalen earlier today as well. Stephon Thompson's another one too. Who else are we missing? I know Gabe
Jackson.
Irvin's out.
Yep.
Daniel Kalen is also gone as well. And then Terrence Knighton also has been in the rumor mill as well. What have you heard on that one, Anthony?
Yeah, I heard he was at Nebraska's practice today, coaching there. So that's something very interesting development. But he has been in those rumors that he's joining Tony White at Florida State, and I'm sure, honestly, by as early as tomorrow, we might get more clarity on that. Might see where he's ending up. But it's just a very interesting time in Lincoln. I know tomorrow's National Signing Day. Matt Rule's having a press conference, supposedly talking about that, but I'm sure some questions about what's been happening these last few days are going to be brought up there. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he says.
Do you think that Nebraska fans are overreacting about everything that's going on? Because, and I pose this because this is a very normal thing to be happening after the regular season is over. And I can understand why, even if Tony White was still here, I can understand why some people were leaving because they were expecting growth this year, and it didn't necessarily materialize itself. But there's a lot of roster cutting coming soon. Mm-hmm. You got to cut your roster down to, 105 now?
Yeah, 105.
And Nebraska's like 150, something like some outrageously balloon number. So this was going to come at some point. But is it justified that Nebraska fans are getting up in arms the way that they are right now?
I don't think it's very justified. I've seen overreactions from Husker fans, obviously, on Twitter, which really makes me think that what if Rule never said that in his press conference a couple weeks ago, saying that he expects 40 to 50 guys to transfer this offseason? Imagine what Twitter will look like right now, seeing all this stuff going on. It would have been even more out of proportion than it already is. But, yeah, it's just changing landscape of college football. I mean, the defensive players, Tony White leaving definitely has something to do with it. I mean, he's your coach for these guys on the defense side of the ball. It's also why, who we've seen from Nebraska's offense to transfer so far: Gabe Irvin, 4th-string running back; Daniel Kalen, 3rd-string quarterback; Malachi Coleman, receiver who redshirted this past year. So I think there's definitely some overreaction. I think it depends on who else keeps entering the portal for Nebraska. I mean, Jamari Butler, Mekhi Bayer are 2 huge losses. Prince Will's another big loss today. But that's just the way it is now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about the roster cuts, and so they see everyone transferring, and especially with the transfer portal being so prominent. But I think there's definitely overreaction. People are going to have to leave one way or another, and so I don't know. And
the whole new wave of the transfer portal has just made things so much more complex, because not only do you have to recruit high school, junior college, players not on your team that you want to get in the transfer portal, you have to recruit your own team now.
Yeah.
That's just another added wrinkle that has been thrown into this. And it's reasons why guys like Nick Saban have been like, I'm done with this. This isn't for me anymore. And you got to wonder, like, where exactly is this going? But I think we're going to start to see probably a little bit more clarity on this as we progress forward. But the Tony White thing is interesting because in my mind, if he was going to leave, I did not think it was going to be a lateral move. I hesitate when I say that because it really isn't a lateral move. But I was expecting head coach Tony White in 2025. If it was going to be Tony White leaving, I was expecting head coach, not DC. So it begs the question, what exactly is going on that made him want to leave? That's just what I don't know.
It's just maybe money was involved, but I know Nebraska was giving him a pretty solid salary to be their defensive coordinator. And, yeah, it's just very, very interesting to see. I, too, thought it was going to be, if he would leave Nebraska, it would be a head coaching job somewhere else, most likely a Power 4 school. Nebraska's defense has been its highlight the past couple seasons. This year, I think it took a step back from last year's, which overall I think was kind of disappointing as they returned most of their starters from last year. Like Luke Reimer was gone. He was the big name out, but still, there's a lot of explosive plays they still gave up. Johnson run against Iowa. But, yeah, it's very interesting to see, and it's just something that not many Husker fans expected.
All right, well, I got one more thing for you before we wrap up the football side of the show, is that not only has there been a lot going on the defensive side, but so much whirlwind has been happening on the offensive side when it comes to the coaching staff. Dana Holgorsen is here to stay at least for the next 2 years, getting a contract.
Yeah, that's obviously big news for Nebraska. In just his short time as offensive coordinator, you can see the Nebraska offense take strides. They're just playing with more confidence. The play calling has been much improved down the stretch than the start of the season. So it's big get, something Nebraska needed to do going forward, and they were able to get that done.
Yeah, I think it was kind of expected. I know we kind of talked about it on earlier segments that we kind of knew it was coming. We just didn't know when or it was expected to come. But I feel like there's been a big difference in the offense since he's come. I feel like Dylan Raiola looks a lot more comfortable for the most part, or more comfortable than he looked in some other games. So I'm not mad about it. Personally.
I personally would have wanted to wait till after the bowl game. Mm-hmm. I think giving out a 2-year deal, and obviously this is from outside of closed doors, so don't really know what's going on during practice when we can't see what's happening. So this is just based off of like personal opinion, but I would have rather had a 2-2 record, or at least win 2 of 3 before going out and saying like, okay, this is our guy. He's only been here for a month. I feel like that's not enough time, at least for me, to feel comfortable saying, okay, here's a 7-figure salary for 2 seasons. Nebraska has the most expensive position coach on their ledger right now, Marcus Satterfield. I'm not saying that Dana Holgorsen's not going to work out. I'm in agreement. I think that the way that the offense has looked under Holgorsen has looked a million times better than it ever did under Satterfield. Like, it's unbelievably evident. But I don't think that only giving 3 games in 4 weeks is justified enough to give out that much money over 2 seasons like that. I would have rather waited till, and this is regardless of what happened in the bowl game, give Holgorsen that month of practice and the bowl game to game plan and get ready for, and then go out and give the contract after. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. If they laid an egg in the bowl game, I'm like, okay, what did you do for the last month? But only putting up 10 points against Iowa, and yes, that was a tough game, tough environment. Iowa's defense is good. It's
always a close game.
It's always a close game. You can't feel your fingertips. Like, I can understand some of that, but I would have liked to see a little bit more out of that than just 10 points, personally, before going out and giving him that contract. That's just where I'm at with that.
I can see that. I feel like overall, I mean, the Wisconsin game, 44-point effort, 44-point output. That's something that Nebraska hadn't been close to since week 1 of the season against UTEP. And then at the Iowa game, I think a lot of this just comes down to the execution of the players. I mean, Isaiah Nair dropped a pass that he could have took all the way for a touchdown. There was just a lot of, miscues on offensive end, a lot of freshman mistakes from Dylan Raiola, things like that. Because I think the plays were there. The players just weren't making them. And I feel like that's something that, as they get older, as Raiola grows and develops, he'll be able to make those plays, obviously. And Holgorsen is able to just coach these players better through that all. So I think that this was not too early to give him an extension. I think that brings him into the bowl game practices and shows the players that he is our guy in the future. And I think that says a lot to them, especially the younger players, guys maybe like Ja'Cory Barney or Emmett Johnson, who have really kind of seen upticks in play once he's been calling the plays.
I think they know though. I think they knew he was going to be here to stay though. My hesitation towards the contract part of it is I just wanted a larger body of work than 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. If you gave me 2 months and you realize, okay, this is who we want, then so be it. That's fine. Sharon Moore with Michigan last year after Jim Harbaugh decided to go to the NFL, I mean, they knew exactly who was going to be taking his spot. And obviously he had the 3 games at the end of the season where he was acting head coach last year with all that going on. But they knew exactly who they wanted because they had a body of work already for it and there was success. Mm-hmm. Nebraska didn't have that success, which is why I would have wanted them to wait until after the bowl game. Even though they knew he was going to be here, that's fine, but wait till after the bowl game to say, okay, he's putting the ink on the paper with his name on it, and he's getting the money now.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, too, comes from just his background, coaching Houston, coaching West Virginia. His offenses have always, ranked up there at the top of the country. While Nebraska might not have showed that in the 3 games that he coached, still, he has the track record behind it. He's already brought in a new receivers coach who has helped coach the likes of Tank Dell, who are NFL players, and I think that's enough for Nebraska to pull the trigger on that extension with him. And I think that it's definitely an upgrade from Satterfield, and he'll just get more time to develop these young guys. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a problem with it being before the bowl game personally. I feel like it was already decided, like you said, everybody kind of knew it was coming. And so just making it official, I don't know. I feel like there's just been such a big improvement, not whatever, not huge improvement, but there's been good improvement that I feel like he's good.
There's going to be a lot to watch over the month of December. We can't say we've seen a lot of Nebraska football activities in the month of December for a while, but it'll be a nice change of pace, I think.
For sure.
Well, Anthony, thank you for hopping on. We appreciate having you back. It's good to get you back in the realm.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Time to switch gears. And we got some NCAA tournament to discuss. Coming up. And welcome back. Anthony's gone. He decided to desert us, and that, you know what? That's fine, because it is time to gear up for some postseason volleyball action. It's finally here. It feels like we were just doing this a year ago, and now it's all systems go again. You lose and you're done. Man, doesn't that set in pretty hot?
Yeah, makes it very intense very quick.
Very intense very quick. Selection Sunday a couple days ago. Nebraska got the number 2 overall seed in the country. Penn State got the 3, Pitt got the 1. Those 3 were not really all that shocking. What the shocking part was Louisville getting the 4 over Stanford.
Yeah.
Personally, I would have rather had Stanford over Louisville, considering Louisville lost 2 games the week earlier. But I don't think it's I think you could have been fine either way in that respect. But the fact that Nebraska stayed at 2, I think, should Nebraska have beaten Penn State, which we'll get into, but if Nebraska beat Penn State last week, I think they would have gotten the number 1 overall.
Do you? I don't know.
I do.
I don't know. I feel like the voting committee was down on Nebraska. Like, obviously, I shared my frustrations as we would look at rankings. The lack of votes for Nebraska throughout the season for the number 1. I don't know.
We fail to forget, though, that the committee that selects where teams go is very different than the AVCA.
But I don't know.
And in years past, the NCAA has prioritized RPI and top 10 wins.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska had the most top 10
had a
wins.
lot.
If they beat Penn State, they would have had 8. Pitt only had 5.
Yeah.
And Nebraska had the best RPI before Penn State. Obviously dropped with the Penn State loss. So I think that's how Pitt snuck in there. I still think, though, if Nebraska was the top overall seed, you could still have a very strong argument that Pitt was the best team in the country.
Yeah, that's true. I think it could have gone either way, honestly. And we'll never know if Nebraska beat Penn State, if they would have been the number 1. But they would have gone undefeated in the Big Ten, assuming that they still beat Maryland. And
then John Cook would be the coach of the century.
Yeah. Using
his own words from volleyball media days. But let's go into that match a little bit. It was a 3-1 win for Penn State in Rec Hall. You could just tell from the start of the game that it was going to be a different kind of night.
Yeah, they just looked off. Penn State was really good at getting Nebraska out of system. And I think they struggled a lot on those tough sets. Penn State was just laying the points down.
Serve receive was not good.
Yeah.
Serve receive was not good. They targeted Harper Murray a lot. You could just tell that she just was really struggling.
Yeah, she was getting overloaded.
They kept the ball away from Lexi Rodriguez, which I don't know why more teams aren't doing that. Clearly, that's just something you got to do.
Yeah.
Keep the ball away from Lexi because that's how you're going to do better. So that was part of it as well. And then just a lot of unforced errors. And Taylor Landfair got pulled out in the middle of the game as well, which I think was an interesting move because I personally would have rather seen Merritt Beeson come out. If you were going to pull someone, pull Beeson out because she really did not have a good game at all.
She only had 4 kills.
And then Lindsay Krause comes in. She doesn't do all that well either. It was a really off night for Nebraska as a whole. And I think that it just goes to show that I don't think that Nebraska is like bad, but I think that we didn't give Penn State the credit that they probably should have deserved.
Yeah, and I think there was also some extra motivation for players on Penn State. Caroline Jurevicius had a night. She had a
career game.
Big night, 18 kills. So I think there was also some added motivation for those players and then their team wanting them to win.
And considering Penn State had not won against Nebraska since 2018.
Yeah. So I think there's also a lot of other added factors, but Penn State is good, and I think they've been overlooked for a lot of the season.
I agree. And I think there's something else that we probably should bring up for a few minutes as well, some of the aftermath from the game, especially with some people online really irking some folks. And I think it's worth bringing up because it is something it is a little touchy, but does need to get talked about, just how bad some people are online. Harper Murray went out and made like an 8-minute video about athletes and mental health and not being in, the same shoes. If you get a chance, highly recommend watching it. It's a good watch. She did a good job. But she put up some like Instagram DMs, just some really awful stuff getting said.
Terrible. Yeah.
And I know she's not the only one who's been getting stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's something that also shows her growth this season is she's like, I'm going to stand up for my teammates. I'm like, I think she talked about how she like kind of fires back in comments when like other people are talking down on people on her team, people on other teams. Like, I love that she's not going to stand for that because it's really easy to sit behind your computer, sit behind your phone. But it's a lot harder when you're out there playing, like she said.
Exactly. And for for 99% of the population, they'll never understand what it's like. And I think it's, it's real easy for us to sit here and say should have done this, should have done this, should have done this.
Yeah.
But we'll never get to understand those experiences because we've never been there and we probably never will. And we'll not be in those types of positions to take a look at it. But if you get the time, definitely do go watch it. Highly recommend. It is eye-opening. But back to the game itself, you really could tell that something just wasn't clicking right. But the defense was still on top of its game. With 15 blocks, they clearly were doing something right there in the middle. Rebecca Alec had a really nice game.
She's had a really
as
good
well.
couple
She's
games.
had a nice second half of the season. So something was still working there. But Penn State was just finding more balls on the floor. And, we talked about earlier in the show how, what Jalen Reyes said, numbers don't mean anything sometimes. He used a different word there, but I'm not going to say what it is. In this game, it kind of did. Penn State definitely showed up to play.
Yeah. Their numbers, 18 kills, and that's 5 more than Harper Murray, and she had the most for Nebraska. And then 12 from Hannah Cameron.
Cameron Hannah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. 2 first names are tough sometimes.
Yeah. She had 12. That's just putting down those numbers gets you ahead really fast.
It really does. And Penn State getting out. It was a game of runs. I noticed just how much of a game of runs it was, especially in the first half of the game. I remember there was 7 different runs in the second set. Nebraska had 6 of those runs that were 3 or more points each, and that helped cruise them to a 25-14 set 2 win. But all of it's moot now. Everyone's record resets. The numbers don't really mean anything. Well, I mean, they kind of do, but they really don't.
But anything can happen in tournament
Anything can happen in tournament play. So let's go through the Nebraska quarter a little bit. And this by far is the toughest bracket. It's not even you can't even compare the rest. It is unbelievably challenging. Yeah. Just what Nebraska's gonna have to go to if they want to make the Final Four. I mean, and it's gonna start with their first game, Florida A&M. They played Florida A&M 20 years ago. They got upset in the season opener in the Coliseum.
Yeah.
After, I think I was reading this from Jacob Badilla for Hail Varsity, was talking about in the press conference on Sunday night how when Cook was coaching that game, half the team wasn't even alive yet.
Wow.
None of them even know what happened that day, but that was Cook's 5th season. I think that was his 5th season, and I think he still remembers it to his day. Florida A&M beat Nebraska in the season opener in that 2004 season. Florida FAMU, as I'm probably going to end up calling them FAMU, they are a very underrated team coming out of the SWAC. They are solid. I think they're going to give Nebraska a run for their money. Then you go to the second round. You're either going to play Miami or you're going to play South Dakota State. Miami might be a seeded team, but I have no idea we have no idea who's going to win the game, that first round game, because South Dakota State, they basically ran the table up until the Missouri Valley the title game when South Dakota upset them.
Yeah.
So South Dakota State's going to be a problem for the Hurricanes. So I think that's going to be very interesting for the second round game. And then you keep going to the top 4 teams. So assuming everything chalks itself to the second round, to the second weekend, that would mean Nebraska has to go up against Baylor, who's been very strong in the second half of the season. And then it's Wisconsin, Arizona State.
Yeah.
Wisconsin should scare people. And here's why.
You already beat them
it
twice
is
this season.
Unbelievably difficult to beat a team for a third time.
It's hard to beat them for a second time, and they did
let
that.
alone twice.
Yeah.
The fact that Nebraska and Wisconsin are likely to play each other for a third time should spell trouble for Nebraska fans.
Terrifying.
It should terrify Nebraska fans because it's extremely unlikely to do that. And I'll give you a personal example of this. My junior year of high school, my high school basketball team played another school 3 times that season. Okay, they were all at our school. Funny enough,
wow.
Interesting how that one worked out. First one was a regular season game. Second round was conference tournament. Third one was state tournament. Okay, first 2 were pretty decisive wins for us. Third time, it was a blowout win for them. It was about a 20-point win.
Yeah.
Just goes to show that it is so tough to do it, and especially when it comes with teams that know each other as well as Nebraska and Wisconsin are.
Yeah.
It's going to take some doing for Wisconsin to get upset, especially considering they will be playing the first weekend in Madison.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any team to do it, might be Arizona State. We've seen how Nebraska can't handle Arizona State. I'd feel better about a Nebraska-Arizona State Elite 8 game than a Nebraska-Wisconsin, which would be absolute cinema, and that would be the ABC game.
Yeah.
For sure. That one's non-negotiable.
With the rivalry that big, and Wisconsin would not want to lose for a third time.
No, and honestly, if you had me pick right now, if let's say the Elite 8 was tomorrow and it was Nebraska, Wisconsin, I'd probably take Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And that's honestly just blindly picking, having no idea what happened in the previous 3 rounds. Because that's just usually how it goes. You know each other so well. Wisconsin hasn't won a set against Nebraska all year. Can't even tell you the last time that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been at least a decade. You know Wisconsin's going to be coming in with a chip on their shoulder no matter what.
Yeah. And no matter who wins that game, if it comes down to that, it is not going to be a sweep. It'll be a dogfight until the last point.
And then that sets up a potential rematch with Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
So let's make one thing abundantly obvious here. Last year for Nebraska in the postseason, I wouldn't say it was a cakewalk because Mizzou was decent. Georgia Tech was good. Arkansas was good.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be something completely different. Miami's good. South Dakota State is good, whoever that's going to be. Baylor's really good. Arizona State is really good. And Wisconsin is really, really good. Like, the road to get to Louisville this year for Nebraska is going to be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's going to be an easy matchup or, like, one to count out. Not that they count out any matches, but there's not going to be one to just, like, check it off as a win before you go in.
You can't even check off the first round
No.
game. You really can't. I think it's going to this is going to be a really tough test for them. And they're fortunate that they had the non-conference schedule that they had and the fact that the Big Ten put, I think, 9 teams in the tournament.
Yeah.
The fact that Washington got in over Arizona, which Arizona seemed like a shoo-in to get in, and they were the first team out with 20 wins, goes to show how deep the Big Ten is. I think that played a huge role in Nebraska being able to get one of those top 4 national seeds, and rightfully they deserved it for how they played all season long. But that's going to go a long way because they don't have to leave Lincoln until, I think, the 3rd weekend of December.
Yeah, and Devaney always shows up. It's always packed. So hopefully the crowd can help give them a couple extra points.
They might have to will their way for this one, but I think it's going to be fun for the players. The first weekend is going to be a grind because you are playing back to back. You're going to want to put Florida A&M away quickly.
Yeah.
You don't want them to linger around because that's going to turn over into the next day because you are going to have to turn around and play a match the next night against whether that's Miami or South Dakota State. But obviously we can't take Florida A&M lightly.
No, yeah.
Not in tournament time because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. Pittsburgh's not guaranteed tomorrow. Like let's remember that.
Yeah.
Like they're probably going to be a Final Four team, but they're not guaranteed the next game. They're going to have to fight their way to get there. We've seen that Pittsburgh can lose this year. They've only lost once.
Yeah.
They can do it. So there's going to be a lot to look forward to with this tournament. It's going to be a lot of fun. And more than likely next week we'll be sitting here again and previewing a potential Nebraska-Wisconsin rematch for part 3.
So crazy.
Which would be nuts.
One thing I do want to say about this team, though, is I think they are, and every team in the tournament is determined. They all want to advance, but I think they're so determined, one, after last year and how that game went.
That's still not out of their mouths.
No. And I know Rebecca Alec has talked a lot about how these seniors are her why and, like, why she wants to succeed, because she wants to get them back to that position, hopefully with a different outcome, obviously. But, yeah, I think that's also something to keep in mind. And every team has their seniors, but that's something that they've talked about a lot this season. So.
Well, it should be a lot of fun to take a look at. Also, we're not going to get to because we're running out of time, but basketball starting conference play very soon. Women's conference play is starting this weekend coming up. At Minnesota home on Sunday. And then men's basketball will be doing Michigan State and Indiana coming up next weekend as well. So that came really quickly.
Really fast, yeah.
After the massive upset win at CHI a couple weeks ago for the men's team. So they're riding high. We're obviously not going to have time to get to it today, but maybe we'll see just how good things look for them going into the teaser weekend of conference play in the Big Ten. Should be a lot of fun. Well, that's going to do it for us. Thank you for listening, watching, however you take in Scarlet Fever, and hope you enjoyed the new aesthetic of the fun new place. Thank you to our producer today, Gus Cathal, hanging out with us and taking care of business before, during, and after for us. Thanks, Anthony. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah,
Danny signing off. We will see you next time.